Good morning, comrades. WHWLP New Orleans 102.3. This is your weekly GMC. Jeff here on the show. Got a couple very special guests today. I guess we can introduce ourselves, just sort of kick it around. Sean, you go first.
Hey, I'm Sean, membership secretary for the Richmond chapter of DSA.
All right. And Thomas.
Hi, my name's Thomas. I'm one of the two co-chairs of the Richmond chapter of DSA.
Yeah, and I wanted to bring these two guys on to talk a little bit about an article they wrote about a strategy for small chapters. So we're all members of the Richmond, Virginia DSA chapter, and I've been here for about 2 years now. I moved here in December of 22. Been involved for probably about 2/3 of that time. And I've definitely seen a marked difference from where we sort of began and where we sort of like moved to from then to now. And so two of the people that were, in the leadership of the chapter who were a part of this process making it happen were Sean and Thomas. And they actually wrote an article in Groundwork, which is one of the splinter groups within DSA, I suppose. One of the caucus. They're a caucus. But they wrote an article because they have a blog and they lifted up the information that they shared. A strategy for small chapters, reviving the Richmond chapter with a campaign-first strategy. And in that article, they write, Richmond DSA has been on a fairly dramatic journey since its inception 8 years ago. We started as a small chapter attempting to find our identity and role in our communities, unsure how to best interface with local labor and housing organizations, and how/if we could approach electoralism. After years of work, trial and error, we have come up with a model that helped us turn our chapter into an organization that is just beginning to throw its weight around and affect change in our community. So I guess to sort of like begin that conversation, so I guess we can talk a little bit about sort of the Richmond chapter and its sort of history. Where were we before we sort of developed a campaign strategy?
Do you want to lead that one?
Sure, yeah. I guess I can try. First, I'll say, I know this is on the Groundwork blog for those of you who are in DSA and are noticing that. Sean and I are not in Groundwork or any caucus. And I think there's maybe like 5 or 6, less than 10 people in our whole chapter that are in a caucus at all. So I just want to put that out there up front in case DSA people are noticing. Yeah. Ask
us about the caucus stuff a little bit more when we've had a beer or two, right?
Yeah, off mic as well. So you wanted to know about what the chapter was like before we started doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I read an article in Damage recently about statementism. And I would say that's basically what we were doing.
What is statementism?
So statementism is, we are putting out emails or putting essentially posting on social media our posture and our disagreement with like the whatever political event of the day, local, national, and affirming our righteousness or essentially, and not really engaging in any way in the political process, just sort of like saying what we believed in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically what we were doing, at least when I joined in at sort of like the tail end of 2020 and then the early 2021. And I'm sure the chapter was doing other things before that because it grew quite rapidly after it was formed in 2017, and was involved in doing like break late clinics and kind of like all the first round DSA stuff that people did after the 2016 election went the way it did. That's kind of my perspective on what the chapter was like before.
Sean?
Yeah, I joined like 6 months after you, I think. And when I joined, most of the time we spent at general body meetings were surrounding national DSA discourse.
What do you mean by that?
So it was just convention for 2020, I think. 2021 maybe, I can't remember. And that was pretty much all we talked about for like 2 meetings. And I was very much looking to, get involved in a community organization. And instead I was given a crash course on national politics that didn't necessarily have much consequence to, Richmond City, what the workers were doing, what the renters were doing, any of that. So yeah, pretty much statementism and just really focusing on things that are not here.
Yeah. And I guess so while there is, some room for, letting your values be known, I guess you could say, and providing an alternate perspective or some kind of commentary. I mean, here we are yapping on the radio, right? I mean, like there is something to be said about, having positions and in the discourse, but you don't want that to become like, you want it to be actionable in a certain way, right? If you feel that, the housing, in Richmond is one of the worst housing cities in the entire United States, right? If you just sort of like post on your blog or whatever it is, housing in Richmond needs to be reformed, and this is specifically how, and da-da-da-da-da. I mean, that's great and all, but like, what are you actually doing to change that, to move it into a more positive direction, right?
Yeah, I think one of the things, I mean, we might have mentioned this in the article too, that we were putting out statements. This is pre-2023 about Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
When we didn't even have like a BDS.
Yeah.
Like we didn't do any BDS work. We didn't organize around BDS. We didn't do any kind of.
You're not even doing the consumer stuff.
Yeah, we weren't even doing like baseline like individualistic type politics. We were literally just putting out statements.
Yeah.
And that's like the thing for me that needed to change was like, it's fine if we want to put statements out, but
it's necessary to put statements out to a certain extent, right?
But regardless of if we have the right perspective on it or not, people will be out there organizing outside of DSA, their workplaces, their neighborhoods or communities, regardless of what our statement is. And if we're not out there doing those things too, then we're just going to get completely left behind by, the working class in Richmond. And I would say a lot of our growth is because we did make that pivot of realizing where we needed to be, not what we needed to say.
Yeah.
And I hate to be provocative here, but like if you're only doing the statement stuff, if you're only saying this is our position, then you're just the guy with the newspaper that's got the wide margins and no pictures. You're the weirdo that everybody's kind of looking sideways at the thing, at the event, whatever you go to. You go to the march, you got the weirdos handing out papers.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll be even more provocative. I think, there's some comfort, and there's probably a reason why it's a predominant form in leftist organizing to only engage in that level of politics, because it doesn't require you to be vulnerable. It doesn't require you.
There's no friction.
There's no friction. It doesn't.
To quote Matt Christman.
Yeah, it doesn't require you to do anything spooky like knocking on a stranger's door and asking them their views on stuff or asking them to vote for a particular candidate. It doesn't involve any kind of scary stuff like going to city council meetings and getting in front of a camera with 100 people behind you, and hundreds of people watching a live stream or getting quoted by a journalist. It doesn't involve anything scary.
Yeah. And again, like this is we're not doing this to be provocative. We're doing this to sort of like provide a path forward or a case study on what has been successful. So I guess to sort of move forward a little bit, when we, in this chapter, I think it was not long after October 7th, we really did take on one of the first really big campaigns that we had in earnest. You want to talk about that?
So after October 7th, we were kind of already in the process of trying to come up with our next campaign to really invigorate our membership after meeting with a national organizer that kind of ran us through the process. And it was right after October 7th, and
Like 10 days after.
It was,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, it was like 10
Immediately
days
after.
It was immediately after.
And we knew we wanted to see if we could pass a resolution for divesting from Israel and defunding sort of the RPD and the state's kind of movement towards giving supplies to Israel's genocide. And we reached out to the allies we had, and we wrote a resolution, and we kind of pushed that, and it really did grow into a really large thing that's beyond DSA now. But it was definitely something that really fueled membership.
Yeah, there was definitely like a hunger in the city because there had been protests since like 2 days after October 7th by Arab Muslim groups in the city, and because I don't think Richmond has a functional, or did at the time, had a functional JVP chapter. I think the JVP chapter were like secretly Zionists in the city. I think I heard that from some of our members.
Many such cases.
Yeah, exactly, and yeah, not shocking. I'm sure many people here. And so we had connections to tap into the existing protest movement. And we'd only had those connections because we've been doing other work in other like labor affiliated spaces and other kind of like, the city has quite a few progressive organizations, and we've been doing work with them as we were trying to restart the engine of our chapter in the years preceding 2023. So that's the only reason we were able to like plug into those organizations that were already doing activity after October 7th to get everyone together and basically spend like, I think we spent like from Halloween until New Year's planning how to launch the campaign and writing this resolution and having just like meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting to get it all ready.
And in this sort of like ramping up process, just to sort of like get to the nuts and bolts of it, I mean, there's a high level of coordination that's necessary. If there is a ton of strategy that goes into it, there is defining what a victory would even be. And even if you don't achieve your goal necessarily of, getting city council to divest from Israel and, make a hard stance in favor of, essentially the ending of a genocide. There are other things that you can do as far as goals along the way. For example, number of members recruited, number of doors knocked, number of phone calls made, number of sort of events held, right?
Yeah. I think it was also, you listed a lot of them, but I think one thing we kind of learned throughout it too, that was the ultimate victory, was figuring out where that specific wedge issue fit into council, because it allowed us to kind of go into our future campaign of trying to elect someone to replace an obstacle on city council for that.
We'll get there in 1 second.
Yeah, for sure. But it was definitely like, it was our first foray, I feel like, into city council kind of.
We were kind of like tangentially involved with the city workers union stuff, but we weren't really doing much.
Yeah. And for people who are not aware, so that there was the city workers in Richmond did a union drive a couple of years ago and ended up securing a contract. So that
was like the first thing Sean and I were doing together.
Yeah.
In the chapter, trying to just figure out what the fuck we were doing. Sorry. what we were doing in DSA.
Where do you see my bill for editing on this one?
Sorry.
No, but so I guess when this, all this strategizing, goes through, and then there was, what was the strategy, and then what was the sort of, how was it received, I guess, not just by the members of the chapter, but how was it received publicly, and how was it received by council, and how was it sort of like, this is a huge moment for the chapter as it was. What, and for that campaign, how did it go? And, from all the various perspectives, I guess my question is.
How did it get received? The Palestine specific?
Yeah, this Palestine campaign, yes.
There was enormous energy. It was pretty obvious, even before we had launched the campaign, that if this issue did not become resolved before the 2024 election, it was going to tank the Democrats' possibilities of winning. It was obvious. It was obvious. I was talking to people about that in October of 2023.
Yeah.
That if this got dragged out into November of 2024, there's zero chance the Democrats were going to win. And so everyone was like very upset. And, polling after polling after polling, month after month, it became more and more clear that this was a defining issue for Democrats. And so, by January, when we launched the career or the campaign at the beginning of the council session at the first week of January, there were like dozens of people showing up, which was something that we had never accomplished before when we were organizing actions. And people were like, what do we do next? What are we like? They were just asking like, how can I get more involved? What can I do otherwise? I mean, there's just enormous energy. And we were struggling to figure out what to do because we didn't know, we never had that kind of energy before.
And I mean, the strategy we came up with was between all the different organizations that were in the coalition we were working with. And I mean, I think what we ended up moving on was, okay, you want to get involved, join an organization. Doesn't have to be DSA, it could be SJP, it could be one of the unions that were also in the coalition or any of that.
SJP meaning Students for Justice in Palestine.
And we were able to, by kind of growing all of the members of the coalition, we were able to sustain pretty constant and consistent numbers at every city council meeting for a year. And that was like the main strategy, I guess, tactic that we kind of chose for the campaign, was to fill all the public comment spots.
To put this issue front and center.
Like, you guys are not going to be able to do your work quietly and in privacy anymore, because we're going to be in your face. We're going to be telling you exactly what we want from you.
And the council itself, however, was just sort of like, what's going on here? Kind of.
I feel like they were completely caught off guard, because before that, I mean, we went to a couple city council meetings a year probably before that, and it was like 4 people maybe speaking, and they were speaking on like, oh, there's one niche issue in my neighborhood, like we need a speed bump or stop sign. It wasn't like, hey, there's 40 people waiting to speak on this one thing, and you guys might be on your phone texting and ignoring us, but we're going to stretch this as long as we possibly can.
I think the council had for years, I mean, even going back to before we even joined DSA, has always operated under sort of like quiet consent process. There's really no debate in Richmond City Council ever.
Everything's on the consent agenda, right?
Everything's on the consent agenda. There's no debate. Everything just gets approved. Even in committee meetings that I've gone to, there's no debate. They just bring up an item that's been recommended to them by some business organization or some nonprofit, and they just give it its assent, and it moves on to the main body, and it gets approved. And so just the fact that people were there yelling at them was, I think, like a shock.
I thought we were doing great. Why are people yelling at me?
Well, I don't think they thought anything. Like, I think, like many cities across the country, being a city councilor is just a way for you to further your business interests.
Yes.
Andreas Addison was a business owner in the city. He was a representative from the 1st District. He was actually one of the only people who was actually helpful with us trying to get our resolution passed, because he wanted to run for mayor. But he was just a business owner who joined council because it furthered his business interests. So is Reva Trammell. She owns, a dozen properties in her district. So is Ellen Robertson. So, I mean, like more than half of the city council are just business people who are trying to further, and that's the case across the country too.
Yeah. It's very common. That's a very common sort of thing. Either advance your business interests or advance your political career.
Yeah. Although I suspect many of the people on our city council do not think that they're going to have a political career beyond the city council.
Not if we have anything to say about it, I guess.
Yeah.
It is interesting though, because I do think across the city council seats, there's like 9 of them. There is a well, sometimes it is spoken, but a roughly unspoken rule that the city councilors know best, and how dare you guys come here and talk. Normally it's unspoken, and they're kind of just ignoring you, and they're condescending. But then, I mean, speaking of Trammell, she lectures you after you go
Queen.
up there, and you're like,
Queen.
Hey, in 1980 you guys did this, and she's like, well, that was a different city council, and it's like, clearly.
Yeah, although Trammell's like a broken clock, sometimes she's on point, because she's yelled at the council president a few times for some of that decorum stuff, where I think when the water system failed a couple months ago, and people were like wanted to yell at the mayor, and the mayor was at council to give a report. And the council president had very clearly made a deal with the mayor that the mayor was going to take 0 questions, both from the public and council.
You weren't even allowed to say his name.
You weren't allowed to say his name. And one of the councilors, Trammell, was trying to yell at him about it, and very clearly, said the secret thing that there was an agreement that he was not going to get any questions.
Wait, the council president said that, or Trammell?
There was clearly an agreement that the council president made with the mayor. That the mayor was going to take no questions from anybody, including council, when he came to give a report on the water system failure.
Because the water system in Richmond failed.
I think it was national news. I'm sure people heard about it.
Yeah.
We could do a whole show on Trammell.
Yeah. Oh my God, I would love that. Let's get her on.
Famously, for just to ground everyone who doesn't know who we're talking about, famously during COVID, she was on camera for one of the virtual council meetings, and she had a Sambo doll, a racist.
Did she really?
Yeah, right behind. You didn't know about this?
No.
My God.
That's awesome. Yeah, she had a little it's a sort of 10 steps worse than the Aunt Jemima thing.
Yeah.
Big red lips, big white teeth, a statue in her camera shot.
No way.
Behind her during a virtual council meeting during COVID.
Incredible.
She only got mildly in trouble for it.
That's insane.
Yeah.
The mammy jar.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Are you Googling it?
Yes, I'm Googling it right now. Oh my gosh, it's incredible. Anyway, we could talk about Trammell all day, but I do want to sort of drill down a little bit on so you mentioned the Students for Justice in Palestine. You mentioned some of the other coalition partners. Just briefly kind of go over who was a part of that and how that went as well. So that's another kind of aspect of this whole deal.
Who's on our coalition?
Yeah.
Oh,
there's a lot of people.
AMP, so American Muslims for Palestine, which we found out is really just one organizer, but I think it helped them grow the organization pretty quickly. And that organization was actually principally responsible for, over the years, there's been a couple protests for Palestine. Going back to the March for Return, there were some protests in the city for that. And in 2019, I think, and again in 2014, there were marches in the city, I believe. I can't remember. I'm positive about 2019 one. I wasn't here for 2014, but I think I remember reading about it. So it had been going on for a while under the surface in the city. And like a lot of, capital cities on the East Coast, it's a, shockingly diverse population. We have a huge Vietnamese population, a huge,
cities are diverse.
Cities on the East Coast are diverse. Cities in the Midwest.
Fair.
Depending.
You ever been to Dearborn, buddy?
Just taking a shot at Sean.
Anyway.
But then there was Students for Justice in Palestine, which was also, I think, newly formed right after 2023, right after October 7th. And then there were some other sort of just Jewish rights, Jewish anti-Zionist activists in the city that had been pushing for a long time to get the city to close this body called the Virginia Israel Advisory Board, which is a board that the state has.
Why does the city of Richmond have that?
It's a state.
Why does the state of Virginia have that? Well, there's actually probably significant economic interest in Israel in the state of Virginia
because of the location of so many defensive.
Yeah, I understand that.
Anyways, there's a couple of other peripheral groups, but the main two were AMP and SJP.
There's Virginia Coalition for Human Rights.
Yeah,
that's who I'm talking about. It was the one that were pushing for the Virginia Israel Advisory Board to be defunded.
That's Nancy's group, right?
Nancy's group.
Yeah. Nancy cracks me up.
Nancy's solid.
Yeah,
you gotta trust our elders. Sometimes they're way ahead of the game.
I cannot agree with you more. I was actually just talking about that with another guest recently. They're the ones that have been around, and even at the sort of lean times, kept the fire lit. Bill's another great example. It's a GSA member from our chapter who's been at it for decades. Yeah, old school. We would have nothing without them. Honestly, we would be building a movement entirely from scratch. At least we have things to work from, because of the people that have been, going through literally the leanest times. You know what I mean? The absolute leanest times. So just to kind of push forward, there was the support for this, and I guess sort of to kind of move forward to, how it played out. We can kind of briefly get to that and maybe get a little bit more into sort of like where the chapter is going, what has happened since, and we could even get into the city council race. So, but I guess so. As far as how the campaign went, I mean, we did fill the city council for a year. We did make sure that at the very least, the city of Richmond could not ignore the slaughter and genocide that was happening there. They like rolled out all kinds of weirdo, lame excuses for like why they couldn't do anything about it. But ultimately, that was something that gathered a lot of interest. It brought forward a lot of attention. And honestly, I mean, despite the fact that we never did get the city of Richmond to do our primary goal, there were a lot of other things that were positive about it going forward. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, it definitely built a larger group of people who were active and paying attention to local politics. Like even now, I mean, the coalition still exists. They still do work. But there's a lot of housing stuff going on right now, like with our campaign and other campaigns.
Well, we've reset priorities. We can talk about that in a bit.
We have a different campaign now.
But even then, they're still plugged into that, even though it's not necessarily directly involved with their campaigns and stuff. But it's just, there's just more people to pull from when you need to mobilize folks around an issue. We're just not necessarily activated before.
Right, which is counterintuitive. Like, you wouldn't think, like, I think a lot of people do, like, a lot of internal theory, and if you actually just go out there and do stuff, or do work, do organizing work, specifically of stuff, I mean organizing work, you will realize that a lot of, like, the internal theory that is from 150 years ago might not be applicable anymore.
Oh, and honestly, one of the other things too, you're getting people involved and you're getting organizers in place with experience. That's one of the things that, and I talk about this a lot, when we did do break light clinics in Louisiana and in New Orleans, my old chapter, one of the best things that was for was if you find a new member who's interested in getting involved or whatever, you put them on a campaign that is something that, if you're doing it for a year, for example, you can start to trust people to be responsible for it. They're gaining experience, they're gaining confidence, and then they can bring their people that are close to them into that sphere as well. And then you can even get new members. So you have an experienced veteran member who has done, stuff before, essentially. And then you have whoever their network of people are, whoever they bring in. And that's important. That's super important. That's like how these organizations and campaigns and everything. It's how they grow.
Yeah, and we realized this after we'd already done it, but you need something low stakes to plug people in when they're new. And the low stakes thing can be attending a city council meeting and just holding a sign.
School board meetings also.
Or school board meeting and holding a sign. You don't have to even speak. Or it can be a book club that turns into, we're going to write a resolution that we're going to read to the council or something like that. Like, you need something low stakes for new members, and that's not like you're going to go walk around the city and door knock apartments and ask people to do to join a tenants union or something like that. Like, you need something lower stakes than that for new members. Sort of like an escalatory model of engagement for people so that they can build, like you said, trust and rapport with the people that are in that organization that you're building.
Yeah, I think skills too.
Yeah.
I think it's much easier to get comfortable with city council, talking about what's going on at city council, and then going to talk to strangers about what's going on at city council.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I do want to push forward to the election campaign. So the Richmond DSA did support a candidate for Richmond City Council. We did do the electoralism thing. And yeah, that's actually, I live in her district, and she actually ended up becoming my city council member, which is pretty cool. Talk a little bit about Kenya Gibson and how she got in, we essentially the chapter came to support her and how that went.
Yeah, we've been tangentially working around Kenya. I don't know which one we want to call it, but
proximal. We've been proximal.
One of our first labor campaigns was around the public teachers getting the right to collectively bargain.
And
other, like,
Kenya was a city council member. I mean, sorry, school board member, a Richmond City School Board member at the time.
And so we kind of watched the relationship she had built with the teachers union and how she kind of stuck her neck out on repeated occasions in order to further their goals and further our goals as an organization without even necessarily engaging with us. And then when we did the Palestine support at City Council, we got to know the city councilors and like where they stood on a lot of issues, and it got us thinking about which ones we could replace, because there's clearly, I mean, that is a huge obstacle for a lot of the work we do. Is our city council is either they'll just accept whatever they get from the mayor and without any questions asked, or they are actively doing bad things. Either they're passively doing bad things or they're actively doing bad things.
And they're still that way.
And they're still that way.
They're still that way.
But
you mentioned that cloistered internal culture as well, where they essentially have all discussion and all decisions made behind closed doors as well.
Yeah, everything's in like a secret meeting. Same with the school board though too.
Yeah.
None of it's with us or like the public.
Mm-hmm.
It's very much like the decision is made before the city council meeting or the school board meeting, and then you got, it's almost performative.
It's not a public hearing.
Yeah.
In like the technical sense, perhaps it is, and like the legal, like checking the box sense, perhaps it is. But in the sort of like spirit of public, like a public issue being put before the public for the public to weigh in on,
right.
It's not the case at all. It's just like let them yap into the microphone on their little 2 minutes or whatever, and we're going to do whatever we were going to do anyway.
Because they know if they do engage with us in a meaningful way, we'll usually get our way. I mean, it's happened with the casino twice. When they actually like let us vote on something. That happened with, was it Navy Hill?
Navy Hill was killed actually by popular backlash, not by.
Either way,
I think they would have done it, except that there was enough reporting that they eventually got the sort of. This is too in the weeds, maybe for the audience. There was a redevelopment project that was really hush hush. No one wanted to share the financials on how they were going to do it, and then the financials were finally published. And I think the whole city was like ready to riot.
Yeah,
we were just going to get fleeced for this redevelopment project. The whole city was. They were going to basically strip the school budget. Anyways, it failed.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, you listen to BHIVLP New Orleans 102.3. It's Good Morning Comrade. So we'd work with Kenya. This chapter had worked with Kenya. The Richmond DSA chapter had worked with Kenya Gibson, and there was sort of a decent working relationship. And then I guess she decided that she was going to run for city council.
Yes. And we had identified her district as like a potential weak one.
Mm-hmm.
The councilor that was in that seat before was sort of like an Andrew Cuomo figure. Like she would park in bike lanes in front of, like illegally park to go to school board meetings, like all the time, like double park.
I don't know if she's as bad as Cuomo.
But she had illegal rentals.
Yeah.
A
corrupt figure, I guess you would say.
Yeah, and from a family of a political family in the city too. For sure, her family was her father was a city councilor.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean it is quite similar.
I think she was just allergic to being like that. Like when we were knocking doors, no one liked her, and I was like, "That's so."
Her family members liked her.
Yeah.
Well.
But we had already like kind of targeted the 3rd district as a potential weak spot, and Lambert wasn't even willing to talk with us, which most counselors to some extent would meet us on issues, even if it was just to like
nod along,
save face or be like, yeah, whatever. She just straight up was like, no, we're not. I'm not meeting. I think she like moved the meeting. Like she made a meeting and canceled it and made one, and then was just like, no, we're not doing this.
Yeah.
And then Kenya said she was running. You met with her.
Yeah, I think because Johnny knows Quentin, and Quentin was her like campaign manager. Johnny's one of our SAR members. In the DSA chapter.
Shout out to Johnny.
Shout out to Johnny. I think he might be watching. Someone had put me in touch with Quentin, and I was like, yeah, sure. This was already like May or maybe late April, and we've been doing the Palestine campaign for 3 months. And I was like, they're not going to give us this. They're not going to give us this win. We need somewhere to put this energy, and we need to find a way to target these counselors so we can put some discipline back on these people. And so I met with her campaign manager and her at a coffee shop and talked to them for like an hour. And, as Sean had said, we already had understanding of her that she was a reliable defender of labor in a city that has like a 1.5% unionization rate. So like she was really like way ahead of the curve as far as we're concerned.
And critically, I'm sorry to jump in, but like it also not been a way for public sector workers to organize into a union prior to a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and she was one of the ones. I mean, she was the one who pushed for it on school board.
Yep. So no one would have sponsored
that. Yeah, no one would have sponsored it. I think she made it like the city. The city was reacting to a law that the state had changed the last time we had a Democratic trifecta, right after Trump won the first time, and they passed a law that said cities could basically like adopt an ordinance that would allow their municipal workers to bargain.
And they would have all the specific rules and parameters laid out in that ordinance.
And in Kenya, and Richmond was the first one to bite at that new state law, and it was because of Kenya.
And the union was well.
Sorry, yes. I always have to give credit.
I think you mean as far as political figures.
Yeah.
Yes, as far as political figures willing to stick their neck out in a city and in a state in which the union way of life doesn't exist. Yes, yeah. Kenya was ahead.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And so, that's a good. So you started having these conversations. We ended up having, essentially throwing support. And that happened at a general meeting. I remember it.
Yeah, she came to a general meeting.
She made her case to the membership
to us for like an hour.
Yeah, and she was very open, very kind of like, I don't know, man. It's like a lot of politicians. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. Yes. When they talk to you, they either talk to you. They try to just sort of like make them feel better than you, or they sort of like don't. They speak in like buzzwords or catchphrases or whatever, and it's like really annoying. Yeah. Speaking specifically to Kenya is like talking to an actual person.
Yeah,
and
someone that knows how to do the job.
Yeah, and she had a reputation on school board as being somewhat of a disruptor and someone who was very interested in transparency, which was very much counter to the culture of what we talked about earlier.
She literally would just ask for the receipts for stuff, and that was revolutionary. Like that is the level of depravity we're talking about in our local political scene.
And the receipts she while she was on school board that she asked for are still coming up and stuff we're dealing with right now in the school board.
Yeah.
Where they're like, oh yeah, thank God Kenya got us this.
Yeah.
So when it comes to, we ended up as a chapter, the Richmond DSA ended up supporting someone like Kenya. How did the chapter end up supporting her? Like, what was the sort of concrete, what did we deliver to that campaign to make it successful? Because there's, we could do the thing that we talked about earlier. We can put out a statement and this is why we're supporting or whatever. And that's, all fine and good, but and that's one way to support. But when it comes to endorsing a campaign, we mean something a little bit different, I guess.
Yeah.
A lot different.
Yeah. We had a long discussion about what we wanted our endorsement to actually mean.
On steering.
Well, even as a chapter.
As a general. Yeah. Oh, yeah, we did as a general. Yeah, we did.
And because we didn't want it to just be a statement. Because,
it's all well and good, but yeah.
If we just made a statement and we're like, yeah, we're endorsing her and we didn't knock doors and she won without us, then what does that really mean for furthering our goals and accountability?
100%.
So it was like, what financial amount can we give? How many people do we think we can get out and knock doors? How many doors do we think we can knock consistently? And we came up with a framework and tiers of this is what an endorsement means. This is what support means. This is what maybe not supporting means. And we kind of just went through every race and mapped everyone onto that and came up with, we could only cover one probably candidate right now, just with how many people we have and how many volunteers we can realistically get out and knock doors for endorsements. And so we just picked Kenya because it was the best district, I think, that was being run in with, again, a candidate that we thought brought a lot to the table to help our goals.
Yeah, and
hold on,
okay.
I think we should be super specific, just so, because people might not know, we had no idea how many canvassers we could actually get to show up. We guessed. We said maybe we can get 10 to 15. We got 10 to 15.
Yeah.
And if 0 people showed up, we would have been with our pants down because we said we were going to get 10 to 15.
Yeah.
And so it was a kind of a shot in the dark. It worked. It was really a shot in the dark. And we knew we had the money to give a donation that we felt was impactful. But in terms, and they tested us immediately when we said we could get 10 to 15 by scheduling a canvas for us.
Yeah.
And we were the only ones canvassing for her at that time. We started 2 months before any of her other supporters started canvassing for her. And we canvassed for 2 months alone for her with literally 10 to 15 people total.
And I mean, those people came back every week.
And they even
hot.
And it was hot. And the campaign even hired and her campaign even hired one of our members.
Yeah.
Who's now her full-time staff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, when I can't help but compare this. I mean, this is obviously not as sexy as what's happening in New York with Zoran Memdani or whatever, but as far as it being extreme.
His hands.
Yeah.
He blessed me. I'm carrying a gift to the Uman.
That's pretty cool. But my point is that this is every bit as meaningful for this city. Like New York, they get the flash because it's New York or whatever. But the meat, and this is not something that is unique. This is happening. We interviewed on this program Richie Floyd from Florida, from Pinellas. I mean, there are DSA chapters. There are groups that are like this that are putting forward their support for people to win in this sort of a hostile electoral sphere and moving things forward. And this is I think this is an extremely good example of that. This is an extremely good example of throwing support behind the difference really that just a little bit of organizing. I mean, I'm not trying to undersell the amount of work and blood, sweat, and tears that went into this campaign, but there's this sort of foregone, sort of predetermined conclusion that a lot of leftists come to, which is that hey, it's never going to work. They're never going to let us win, so why bother? And this is just the perfect counter to that narrative, to that sort of perspective, right?
Yeah, I mean, irony is counter-revolutionary. Sorry, bad news for you.
Or at least doomerism.
Doomerism
right?
and irony are counter-revolutionary. Sorry, folks.
I also think, though, that it is just the start.
Mm-hmm.
She is still just one of 9.
Yeah. Just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah. She's definitely helped us move things along. Especially with the housing stuff and keeping us up to date on how that stuff's going. It's a little obfuscated from us.
Yeah.
So that's the new campaign.
She literally drafted a FOIA request for us, and I was like, okay, I'll submit it. Yeah, whatever.
So housing. So we're kind of moving forward. We listen to the HIV LP New Orleans 102.3. This is Good Morning Comrade. Sean Cassar and Thomas Adams on the show. King. What the hell? Why did I say Thomas?
Another different random white person.
Anyway, regardless,
Sorry.
No, why are you sorry? I got your name wrong.
No, that's okay.
At least
I just hit you with a real fastball after that.
Anyway, oh Jesus Christ! Moving forward to housing, there is a new housing priority for the chapter of DSA Richmond. Do you want to talk about that?
Okay, yeah, I guess I have to take this one. So
it's affordability, less so, but housing is a key component of that.
So there have, much like the Palestine stuff, there was an existing political apparatus of groups working on affordable housing in the city that range from sort of non-profit spectrum to the tenant union, we are organizing to do rent strike type stuff. Although those are not legal in Richmond, they're not protected. You just get evicted, and that's the end of it. We basically did the same thing. We met with those groups over the course of months, and came up with a unified campaign demand, and took it to council and have been pushing for it. There was this particular demand was for what's called a rental inspection district, which is basically like proactive code enforcement in areas that are deemed by residents or the community or council or whoever to be areas where there is a high proportion of slumlords. Those have to get pre-cleared by the city before they can be rented, basically on a renewing basis of to be set by the city, usually 4 years. So we took that to council and have been pushing for it. And other groups have been working on this particular demand for 2 years. And the last mayor let it die because he didn't want to do it.
You know what else just died for him?
His career.
His lieutenant governor campaign.
That's his whole career, buddy. He lost his city, and that lost him the lieutenant governor's race. He's cooked. Yeah. Bye-bye, Clinton machine.
Anyway, yeah. So yeah, the LeVar, the Stone Man, just decided to let it fall off, and so
we're trying to take
it back up. Yeah,
this new mayor who said he said he supports it, and that his planning director has actually already created a draft of it and submitted it to some of the council members. They said it'd be done by now, and be actually before council by now. It hasn't been, so we've been kind of trying to drill back in on that. But yeah, that kind of sets us up to where we are now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned some of the particulars, and this is, and I don't want you to reveal the whole strategy ahead of time for everybody, all the haters to figure it out, but sort of when it comes to sort of building support for something like this, what are you looking at?
We did the same thing we did last time.
Mm-hmm.
We took it to our general membership body and we debated it.
Mm-hmm.
We had been meeting on it for a while. We have a housing and a tenants' rights working group that has been working on this issue and housing rights for years. We kind of just let that group kind of lead the way. And in doing that and taking the hand, and me, because I'm one of the people in the housing working group, and me taking my hands off the wheel and seeing what happens to the car when I take my hands off the wheel, other people stepped up.
Doesn't that feel great?
Take leadership positions who were not in leadership positions in any capacity in the chapter.
You know what that is that you're doing, bro? You're doing organizing. It's incredible.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yes. Yeah, I know. Yeah. So, so we're growing new leaders in the chapter by doing this and letting them drive.
That's awesome.
And
most of them weren't even members a year ago.
Most of them were not even members a year ago. Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, exactly. And now they're taking leadership positions and making this work.
Okay. Awesome.
It's a beautiful thing. The babies are stepping up.
Yeah, and then I'm not from a union family. I grew up in Miami. I don't have any idea how any of this works. I'm just trying to I've read a couple books. I'm just trying to figure it all out.
We won't hold the reading books against you.
Yeah, it's the reading books. It's it's the meme looking out the window at the wall, looking out the window at the beautiful scenery. It's like reading books. And reading books.
Sean, as far as you've seen at the campaign and other things that we're up to, as far as Richmond DSA?
With the housing campaign, I think it's just been great to see how many different people are thriving in the chapter. Because for so long, it was 7 people doing most of the actual
100% of the work, yeah.
And now it's 15 to 20 of, with very little overlap with those 7 people taking the reins and running.
Yeah.
And then just out of trying to get popular support for the campaign, we've canvassed, we've tried to activate other groups through the Palestine Coalition, for example. I know people have been cross-posting in there and they try to get folks out. The city council and press conferences and stuff in there, just because, housing, Palestine solidarity, there's a lot of natural overlap there.
Mm-hmm.
It's how we could be spending our money and how we're actually spending our money.
Yeah.
Other work we're doing, Jeff and I here are helping to start a new walk local.
Mm-hmm.
So the Central Virginia E-Walk is now live.
Emergency Workers Organizing Committee. We talked about that a lot with Eric Blanc on the show a couple months back.
Yeah, and it's been awesome. I think we had like 12 people on the meeting today, which is more than the 3 that were there originally. And everyone's got campaigns. Everyone's, organizing a workplace. So, maybe that 1.5% that we kind of pulled out there of median density. Hopefully that.
I was guessing. I don't actually know.
I don't know.
I think it's pretty low.
Well, it's what, 6% in the state?
Is it 6% in the state? But it's like mostly a Nova because it's federal workers. Yeah.
That
might be going down really soon, honestly.
Yeah. But hopefully we're able to pump that Richmond number up.
Yeah.
All that. So
3.6% in the city of Richmond. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's post the city and the teachers being unionized, which is like several tens of thousands of workers. So pre that organization drive, I do think it was under 2%.
Yeah, I was surprised when I moved here, because ironically, I came here working for a union and seeing just how sparse the density was around here, and yeah, it's definitely stronger in the northern side because they have members at airports, they have members at there's a lot of janitor members over there. At least for the local that I used to work for us. Yeah, you look at 32 BJ, and now they have city and county workers in Fairfax. Fairfax won their election for their recognition a couple of months ago. Shout out to our friend who was one of the organizers on that campaign. And Loudoun County got a contract a few months ago as well. So all after Richmond. Richmond led the way. I will say that.
Yeah. Well, I think what we're kind of like talking in circles around right now is something that we should put a pin in for everybody. Your local terrain may vary.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you need to be astute about your local political terrain and what is a good political campaign for your local terrain.
And I think the benefit of doing campaigns is that they have a time, like an end date or an end goal.
Yeah.
And your terrain's going to change constantly. And especially as you win campaigns or you lose campaigns, it's going to change over and over again. And if you're working in these long, like, we're going to focus on this one issue and this one issue alone, and we're only going to do this one thing because we're right on it, you might be having success, like for labor for a long time. Like, we were really focused on labor as a chapter, which is great.
There's a lot of labor stuff going on when we first joined. Yeah,
there's a ton. We had Starbucks. I think almost every Starbucks is now unionized. Robinson just won. Last weekend or a couple weeks ago. And the issue though is that when you do that focus and you don't pivot and you don't have that agility to kind of move where the momentum is your membership does fizzle because especially for labor is like. You're not given any heads up. You need to mobilize on like a moment's notice, 2 days before the thing, and then it's done. And then it's like, okay, I guess we'll just wait.
And then you wait for the vote results to come back from their thing, and it takes weeks. Right. It's like a lot of lull.
And you there's no like, by the time you announce if they won or lost, people are like, oh yeah, I forgot that was a thing. And so it's really hard to kind of build that and like sustain the momentum throughout. So. I think the campaign structure definitely better captures and funnels energy.
I guess the final question I'll have, and we can sort of say goodbye. But I do think this is a really important one, and we can also give you a chance to talk about the article one more time. But I asked this question when we endorsed a member for the National Political Committee of this person. Because I do think it's important because there is so much going on right now. I mean, the United States, as of recording, bombed Iran's nuclear sites, 3 nuclear sites in Iran yesterday. There's constantly, we've been dealing, obviously, we've made it a part of our campaigns to be involved in, the response to the genocide that's taking place in Gaza. There is a lot of stuff happening right now. How do we maintain focus? How do organizations like DSA maintain focus on these really important priorities that we've, taken the time, the energy to plan out while all this other stuff is going down? And how do you respond to, this is like a $64 question sort of deal. How do you respond to all of this stuff in a meaningful enough way but also focus on what we're working on. And really, should you even do that? That's a. I know it's a really tough question, but I think it's worth kind of jumping into. It is a priorities question primarily, I think.
Yeah. I also think, though, that it's not all on our DSA chapter to respond to every single issue.
Yeah.
I think through all of our work, we've, helped folks strengthen their own structures, or helped build other structures that didn't exist before.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just through the work, those things do grow, and a lot of those structures are better equipped, or they're better positioned to deal with, some of the specific issues, maybe around ICE or, firing of the federal workers, mm-hmm. or stuff like that. And just using the networks that we've helped build through our work to kind of, protect our community, but mm-hmm. realizing that it's not like DSA is going to be in the head of every single one of those efforts. Hopefully, mm-hmm. we're involved in a lot of them, but
mm-hmm.
It's not about our chapter. It's about the community we've built through all of the work we've done in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
I think it's easier for a chapter, and I don't know anything about any other TSA chapters really, to be honest with you. But I imagine it's a lot easier for a chapter the size of New York City to have a response to every crisis, because they're huge,
mm-hmm.
which means their
hundreds and hundreds of members, thousands of members.
Yeah, which means their capacity is huge. Mm-hmm. We only just recently crossed 400 members in the city. There's too much happening.
Mm-hmm.
Like, realistically, what is our response going to be? We're going to go back to statementism.
Mm-hmm.
So, when there are particular instances where there are acute crises, like Richmond has the second highest eviction rate in the country. When a member is being threatened with eviction, we get them money to not get out of their home, for example. But bombing Iran, I don't know. I hope someone organizes a protest.
Yeah, we can direct people towards that. We can make sure that we're because members will inevitably want to be a part of these kinds of things, and we can facilitate that. But as far as taking the lead, that's not really even our business a lot of the times, because, quite frankly, there are organizations that are straight up anti-war movements that we can plug into, and we don't have to be the leaders of.
And they already exist in the city, and we know that they're going to set stuff up, so we don't have to make it a problem. We don't have to make it a priority.
Yeah, we don't need to brand it with ourselves. We need to understand what we're working on. We need to focus on that and provide support where necessary. That's exactly right.
Precisely.
So I guess the article is in Groundwork. It is called "The Strategy for Small Chapters: Reviving Richmond Chapter with a Campaign First Strategy." Anything else y'all wanted to say before we get out of here?
Go do stuff.
Go do stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Organize your workplace.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. A lot of us have highfalutin ideals, and I am in terms of the religious eschatology of organizing. I think deeds matter a lot more than beliefs and
there you
ideas.
Go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Unless you challenge those ideas, they're just going to be in your head.
Yeah. Boom. Well said. Thomas King, Sean Cassar, thank you so much for joining us. Where can we find you guys? Social media or anything?
I'd rather you just talk to me in person.
There you go. I'll give you his phone number.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks everybody for listening. This has been Good Morning, Comrade. You can listen to us I don't know if we've moved to Tuesday yet. We're actually moving to Tuesdays on WHIV. You can also find us on YouTube, on Twitch, on all your podcast apps. Just search Good Morning, Comrade. Thanks everybody for listening. We love you. Bye-bye.
Roll up on, 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 roll up on.